With its seemingly stoic and effortless acrobatics in the air and the freedom to soar over vast distances, the bald eagle has embodied the spirit of Americans for over 200 years. But despite our love for this beautiful king of the sky, the bald eagle, with just a little over 400 mating couples in the continental United States, was put on the endangered species list in 1963.
Bald eagles became endangered for two main reasons. One, habitat loss, and then secondary, there's a chemical called DDT that used to be very common, and it had a huge impact on eggs and a lot of species, but eagles in particular, weakened the eggs, so the bird would sit on them and they'd crack and break.
As our country was being developed, the natural wetlands were being drained so that that ground could be farmed. When that area was drained, the eagles in Indiana, for the most part, stopped nesting here. The last active nest in the state was 1897.
But the hardships the bald eagle endured would be far from permanent, for just like the determined gaze of an eagle, America set her sights on rescuing our nation's beloved bird, and recovery efforts began across the U.S.
We eliminated the use of DDT, so that's been able to cycle out of our environment.
And with the additional protections of the laws that have been passed, that provided those birds a lot of opportunity to expand into habitats that could support them.
Here in Indiana, our part in the bald eagle's recovery began on Monroe Lake with the Bald Eagle Reintroduction Program, and would become one of our state's greatest success stories.
There wasn't a lot of nesting activity in some states. In Indiana, there was none. But we'd have them migrating through in the spring and fall migrations from other areas. And the fact that they were using the reservoirs that had just been built recently in the 60s and early 70s, that gave them another freshwater resource and another place to look at potential nesting opportunities. Then in 1984, we created the Non-Game Fund, and based on the tax donations that people gave us the funding to pick out our first reintroduction effort, and that was going to be the bald eagle. When we started looking at places to do the reintroduction, Chris Iverson, who was the non-game biologist at the time, looked at all the other reservoirs, the river systems, and for the previous 8 or 9 years, Lake Monroe had been one of the highest count areas. So in '85, we began the bald eagle reintroduction here at Lake Monroe. Chris actually wrote up the proposal to the federal government. It was a 5-year proposal. The intent was to raise 30 to 40 birds, maybe. The goal was to have maybe 5 nesting pairs by the year 2000. And actually we were able to expand it a little bit. Went from a 30 bird potential in the 5-year period to 73 birds.
On August 9, 2007, the bald eagle was removed from the endangered species list, and Indiana followed suit shortly after, marking an over 2-decade-long effort by our state's conservationists and naturalists.
It's doing amazing. The first nest in the state was in '91 that was successful. Right now we're looking at over 300 nests in the state.
The bald eagle is still under state and federal protection. But because of the success of the reintroduction program, bald eagles no longer need to be monitored as closely.
They're on the list of special concern. They're obviously going to be watched closely. And then we have the Federal Eagle Protecting Act. And then in Indiana, we have a law that replicates those federal laws and also provides state controls. With 300 active nests and all of the state being involved, logistically, it's a challenge to try and track that with our own staff. The staff's not that large and the challenge is pretty big.
Instead, the Department of Natural Resources relies mostly on local volunteers to help them gather an estimated annual count.
So we use citizen scientists, we use volunteers, we use people that are in local bird watching groups like Audubon societies and other kinds of groups to help keep track of these birds around the state. They report the birds, they report the nest, they report the behavior of the birds in the nest and the reproduction. All that goes to our non-game biologists in the avian section, and so we have a good feel. It's not an accurate count, but it's a representative count.
If you find yourself boating along the backwaters of Monroe Lake, you might spot one of our greatest representatives to the success of the Bald Eagle Reintroduction Program. Known by the distinctive bands around her leg, her name is C43, and she has been gracing the skies of the Midwest for almost 3 decades.
C43 showed up again a couple years ago after being off the radar for quite a long time. She's now one of the oldest wild eagles in the country. So it was very exciting to not only see her again, but see evidence that she is still nesting.
C-43 is a 1988 bird. She was roughly 6 weeks old when we got her, so sometime in July, she'll be turning 30.
For those looking to get involved, our area's local wildlife defenders hold an event every winter for people to come catch a glimpse of a bald eagle in the wild and learn more about how to minimize our threat to them.
This is our second annual Eagles Over Monroe, which is an event that celebrates the history of eagles here at our property, and we do a focus on current research. We have live raptors, we have a driving tour, all kinds of activities for people to learn more about eagles and other birds here.
This continuation of keeping people tuned in to something that's as exciting as these eagles are is an opportunity that the public really enjoys having. And it gives us an opportunity to help tell the story, and then they tell the story. It's one of those things where everybody that's out there can make a difference if they just take the time to put the effort in.
For Indiana, the successful return of our nation's bird signifies not only that we can restore and protect our environment and its inhabitants, but that through this stewardship, we can bring new meaning and a goodness to our own lives.
I think one of the importances of bald eagles is that they are a symbol, not just as our national bird, but I think they're a really important symbol of what's possible. Humans have some very significant negative impacts on a lot of species, and I think bald eagles are very representative of that sometimes it's possible to bring back what we've previously destroyed. They are just a remarkable success story.